Hello and welcome back to By the Drip. This is a podcast for coffee lovers, entrepreneurs, and those who love to enjoy the story of coffee. Today I'm joined by none other than Rachel Peterson of Hacienda La Esmeralda, the farm that initially discovered and brought Geisha to the world. In this conversation, we talk about the history of Geisha, going all the way back to when the family first bought the farms. We talk about the recent, incredible achievement of winning first place in all three categories of the Best of Panama and winning the Panama Cup here in Boquete just recently in June, and becoming the first ever coffee producer to win all three categories in the same year, as well as setting records in their geishas for a 97-point score and a 98-point score that was broken later that day. This is a fantastic conversation with Rachel. If you're a coffee lover, you will get to know the history of the Peterson family, the Geisha varietal, and what the future might hold for specialty coffee. Thanks for tuning in. Pour yourself a cup and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are sitting here with Rachel Peterson. Rachel is an unbelievable force in the coffee world, a very important person in the specialty coffee industry. She's just gone on with Hacienda La Esmeralda to win all three first places in the Best of Panama, a feat that has never been achieved by anyone in the history of the competition. So some incredible stuff to talk about today. Rachel, thank you for being here. Welcome to By the Drip.
Thank you. Cool. Quite an introduction. A lot to have to own. A team effort for sure. The Triple Crown. A team effort, and definitely not just me. So yeah, we're super excited about that. You know that was just very recent, and wow.
Yeah, we're about a week off of
yeah
the results, and
about 10 days.
10 days. Okay, somebody's counting. There's trophies over here. I'll panel the trophies later on in the recording. I can show you that for the video. Before we start talking about the Best of Panama, we always start on the show just talking, how did you get into coffee? I think a little bit about the history of your journey. Family business, I know, but I think people would be fascinated to know a little bit about the
definitely
more details.
Yeah, because it's not quite as straightforward as some people would think, because I grew up on this farm that I had coffee around me all the time. I mean, I did in a way, because coffee is part of the culture here in Panama, and around us there was always a lot of coffee. But when I was growing up on the farm, we had we had vegetables, and then we had a cattle for meat, and then we moved into dairies. And when I was growing up, we mostly had dairies. And then in the mid 80s, my dad planted some coffee in around, I'm going to say around 900, maybe 1,000 meters, to diversify a little bit out of dairies. And then they planted a larger area. They did the beneficio in the 90s. And so that is really when I was already married and living in Puerto Rico, actually, in 92. So that all sort of happened during the time that I was in college. And then I was living in Puerto Rico. So I really got into coffee. I was coming back for the Best of Panama competitions during those early years, like in 99, 2000, I would come back to see what was happening with the early on Best of Panamas, which were really only international judges who were coming to score and tell us, whose coffee was better. We were always almost last. But then again, we had coffee at 1,000 meters right here around Palmira. So we were like either at 23 out of 24 or something like that, always. Those first years. So then all of a sudden in 2004, there's this coffee. Daniel had just recently come back from college in the US. He was working here at the farm. I guess I should go back. We had bought a coffee farm in the late 90s. It was an abandoned coffee farm in the late 90s. So, and I'd gone with my dad to visit it because beautiful coffee farm. It was a beautiful farm in general, Jaramillo. But about in 96, then when my brother came back from college, and I think he came back in the early 2000s, he started learning how to cup coffee. He went up to Royal Coffee in California and took up a sample in 2003 of this new coffee farm. And they were like, wow, this is so different from your usual offering, which was only Palmita, 1,000 meters.
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
What are you growing at 1,000 meters? What variety?
Okay, so they started out with Katimor, and then they moved on to Katwai.
Okay.
So it was Katwai at 1,000 meters. But they took out the Katimor in the late, like in the 90s, because they started out with Katimor. That was the thing that everybody's doing because it had a great production and this and that. So anyway, so up in Royal, they're like, okay, this is super different than your Palmira coffee. What's going on here? What is this? It's very fruity. It's very floral. Very different. So Daniel came back from that in 2004. He separated these coffees into individual lots and put the Geisha into the best of the Geisha won. It was a record year. It was a record scores. It was a record year in terms of the auction as well, $21 a pound, which is huge back then. So in 2005, everybody was kind of like, okay, now what do we do with this variety that all of a sudden we have, and we don't know how to market, and we don't know what price to put on it, and we don't know anything about what to do with this.
You've got Geisha number 1 in the BOP.
Yes.
And then you're producing Geisha, but I imagine at a very small
quantity. Let's say, I think that first year, 3 bags, because back then we didn't obviously have boxes or anything. It was like 360 kilo bags or something like that when it was auction. And then like the next year, we might have had 15 or something like that. And so we put some in the auction, but we want to sell some outside of the auction. We need to have a price to do that. And my dad was, well, I kind of skipped about how I got into it. So I got into it because we were deciding what we should do with this new variety and how we should sell it and how we should market it. And that's how I came on board to try and do that. I learned how to cup. I got my Q grading certificate in 2006. So I started both giving Q grading classes, but also knocking doors everywhere to try and get this Geisha out there, mostly in the US at that point, because all of our buyers in 2004 were from the US, except for Robert Thoresen, I think. It might have been 2004, 2005, and he was from Norway. So back then, my dad thought, well, this is it sold for $21 a pound in the auction 2004. Coffee price was around $1 something, the C price, but coffees from Jamaica and Hawaii were selling like for $16 a pound. So we said, okay, and I think we started at $12 a pound, and that's the direct offer to roasters. And that's how I started off in coffee, looking where we should put, what we should do with Geisha, how we should market it, and how we could get the voice out there of what this was and get it to the most places possible. I sort of skipped over a part. When we bought that farm in 96, in 97, my dad, or 96 itself, my dad actually looked at the leaves of some abandoned coffee trees on the bottom part of the farm. And he chose one that was suffering the least from fungal problems.
Okay.
And we did a nursery. We grew out the plants, so we replanted a much higher elevation, not much higher, it was 1,500 meters. It was Mario, but it was higher than it had been before. And it's definitely higher than 900 or 1,000 meters that we have here. And so we replanted this whole area, and since it takes about 3-4 years for it to start producing, that's why in 2003 was that first year that came up, and Daniel took it up to Royal. So going back to 2004 too, there were a bunch of different things that made that happen. So there was luck involved in that, as well as science and trying to put a good coffee into the VOP. So in 2003 and 2004, before Daniel put it into the VOP, Rick Reinhardt was here in Panama doing a cupping class for different producers here. Up at Mireya Moscoso's Arcoiris Beneficio. And so he took that coffee to Rick and said, what do you think about this coffee? Like, is this bad? Did I process it poorly? Because he had no idea what was going on. Because it was just, you can get fruity flavors out of processing too. He was very confused, and he was a new cupper.
This would be a traditional wash back then.
This was a traditional wash. It had been mechanically, mucilage removed mechanically, depulped, and dried on the patio.
Okay.
So it's probably 3 days drying, and or 4. And Rick was like, so Rick put it on the table of those coffees that he was cupping that day, and he was like, wow, this is wild. This is not at all like a Panama coffee. It's a really good coffee, though. It tastes like an Ethiopian coffee, but a very, very clear with all the notes, floral notes, but an Ethiopian landrace coffee or variety. And so, fortunately, since Rick had already tasted this coffee, because timing and context is important, the international judges at that moment really were looking for a traditional Panama coffee.
Okay.
When it was competing in the BOP. And the traditional Panama coffee, it's going to have, if it's a cacahuay especially, it's going to be like maybe some chocolate, nuts, citric, a little bit citric, maybe if it's very high grown, a little florality. So the year before, coffee had sort of been kicked out for being too floral. And so,
It's kicked out?
Yes, because the judges were like, no, this does not represent Panama coffee. This is not a Panama coffee.
Wild to reflect back on that. And now it's like floral.
Floral. But all of these things led to it. If he had not gone to Rick Reinhardt and asked him, what do you think about this? It would have been kicked out too, because it was right then. And that at that moment, though, Rick Reinhardt, when they came across it in the cupping, he was like, no. This is a coffee from here, from Panama. It's a very good coffee. We shouldn't kick it out. And he was able to convince the rest of the jury to leave it in. And then that's what happened. So there's a lot that happened during those years that have to do with the world or timing, being ready for for something different. Panama coffee back then was like 83 points. And that was what they were sort of having in the BOP. And that's what they wanted more of. It could go up to 87 if it was a super high elevation. Okay. Very good. That's why. So.
And do you remember what this Geisha would have scored?
95. Well, the second year. I have it for the second year. I don't have it for the first year. I have it for the second year that it was 95 points. 95 compared to 88 or 89, which was the second place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was a huge difference.
Wow. A life-changing coffee experience for those judges.
Yes. That was when the whole God in the Cup thing. Did you ever hear about God in the Cup? Yeah. That was, from Green Mountain, Don something. Sorry, Don, I can't remember your last name right now. He said that. He was like, oh, this coffee is so great. I can see God in the cup or something like that. I'm sure we regret saying that so very much at this point because... Wow. But I remember Alan Neatless back here was here, and it was the whole Fruit Loops, all of this fruity flower or floral stuff. What is this? And it took off. And since they all loved it, we were able to continue. So 2005, 2004 we won, 2005 we won, 2006 we won, 2007. And then 2007 was a record-breaking auction where the actual platform fell because if it was meant only to go up to $100, nobody ever thought a coffee would sell in an auction for over $100. So at $99.99, the whole platform,
that one extra
kaput.
Okay.
Yeah. And then so he finished off that auction on the phone, and that went up that was record-breaking too. That was $130 per pound. So 2008, we decided, okay, let's do our own auction because it'll give us an idea really at how much we should be selling this coffee for. We were still around $15 a pound, around there. How much we should sell it for. So we do our own first auction. And I remember I didn't even participate in BOP that year. Daniel and I decided, let's keep our coffee, all of it in the auction so people don't get confused, because it's here and there. So we did our own auction. We had 6 batches. It was batch 1 through 6. So batch 1 sold at over $100 a pound, and batch 6 sold at $5 a pound. So you're like, okay, this wasn't very helpful. And then, and then we started to learn, okay, we can't put it all in. Quality is super, and because batch 1 through 6 were actually scored by Daniel and myself in terms of quality. Like, that's
Batch 1 was rank 1.
Yeah, and I think the door.
Got it.
And then, because my dad wanted to make them all homogeneous, and I was like, no, it's not going to work. Everybody wants something unique. And then we started evolving with the auction. After that, we started learning, well, for a while, we put in huge quantities. I was telling you that the other day. We put in
300 pounds, I think.
They were, at the beginning, all of the lots were 300 pounds until, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was for a long time, maybe more, maybe 8. Well, this is our 18th auction this year. So, probably for 10 years, each auction lot was 300 pounds, and we had multiple of each one. So it was a lot. It was a sales tool more than it was a marketing tool. Now it's become more of a marketing tool. We have very small quantities that go into the auction, but very high quality.
Yeah, incredibly high quality.
Yeah. So we've changed the way we do that business, and we don't try and sell large quantities on the auction platform. But we went up to selling, I think I had 49 different they were not different lots. They weren't all unique, but there were 49 lots in the auction at one point. And that one
49 different
49. Well, they weren't all unique because some of them were repeated. I think I had 18 samples. But there were repeated 300 pound.
Mario 1, Mario 2, Mario 3, something like that.
Well, let's say it was Mario Carnaval because we've always gone with that naming.
Yeah.
But Mario Carnaval would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or 6, and however many I wanted to put in there. And then 1 year in the auction, and we did pretty well like that for a while. And then 1 year I noticed that we were not doing that great. So we started diminishing the quantity, not the quality. The quality always has gone up since the very first auction. And we just started putting out less quantity and seeing it more as a marketing tool than as an actual sales tool.
Right.
So now, 18 years later, we've got 60. Well, last year we had 20 samples. This year we have 16 different samples, but most of them are nano lots, very, very small, very high elevation. Very, very different from how we started out. And no kidding about the processing. I mean, it certainly isn't a mechanically demucilagenated patio dry coffee anymore.
4 days pretty long.
We have a bunch of, low temperature fermentations and climate controlled drying, and there's all sorts of different. We try to dry it really slow now, and we think it makes it last a lot longer, the quality. So a lot of our processes, all of our processes now are much longer than they used to be.
Right. I've tasted all the auction lots. We're sitting in the lab right now. I've tasted all the coffees. They're beautiful. You should participate in the auction. It's a floral experience. I'd like to come back to the auction, but can we rewind a little bit?
Yes.
So it's 2003, 2004. You've just decided you're coming back. You're going to work because of Geisha winning the Best of Panama. What was the decision that went into that? How?
Well, I started working from Puerto Rico, which is where I was living in 2004. So I would come back for the BOP. I would come back for clients when they were coming, and it was nothing like now. Like now, you've seen we have multiple clients every single day. We would have I don't know, some people that would come through and very few. It was a completely different world. So I could come back actually from Puerto Rico to attend to clients and to be here for a couple of weeks during the harvest season. That was enough back then.
Okay.
And then I would do all of we would choose the auction coffees, and then we would set it up. Malcolm Stone was in charge of the auctions back then. He was super helpful in that sense about all the details. I guess, well, that was the best Panama auction now I think about it, because we didn't start doing our own private auction until 2008. So yeah, for those, I didn't move back for completely until 2010. So I worked from Puerto Rico for a full 5 years, and I would travel a lot to that. I mean, as we got closer to 2010, I would travel here a lot more than before. But I also had to travel for sales, because you have to do the expos, and we were still opening markets back then. We were still trying to find out who was interested in this geisha coffee. And our biggest clue to that started in 2008 when we had our own auction, because we were able to sample out to the entire world, basically. That made a huge difference, because we realized that we didn't need the people to come here to visit us to be able to sell coffee to them. And we could send these samples out, and then we had like all of these countries, China and Japan and Korea, interested in these lots, and that opened up that whole world to us too.
And you're sending probably 1 pound samples at that time?
Yeah, that's a good point. At the very beginning, we were probably sending
huge samples.
Samples, yes, because it was at least, it was 1 pound samples back then. Now that you say that, yeah.
What a world.
What a world, yeah.
When Geisha first won first place.
Yes.
What went through your mind? What went through the family's mind? What was that moment like?
Well, coming from last place almost all the years, to first place was insane to us. We're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Do people know that you were in last place all those years?
Not that many people know. They might be finding out.
100 people that watch this conversation.
Yeah. No, it's not something, but the papers are still around. There were only like 24 or 23 coffees back then that would compete. I remember that Lerida was always winning.
Oh, it was always number one?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they had a high elevation catuai. Wilford was also up there with his higher elevation catuais. My dad back then did not believe that elevation played any part in a coffee being good or not being good. And he's like, that makes no sense. What is it? Are you saying that the pressure of the oxygen pressure, whatever, is creating a different flavor? And then we realized, no, it obviously has to do with temperatures and the maturation of the coffee and so on and so forth. Well, he became a believer, after these years.
That's great. So that moment, how would you compare that moment of discovery in first place versus 10 days ago?
This is 10 days ago.
Yeah. Is it a similar degree of emotion, or is it a completely different experience for you?
It was completely different, to be honest, because we were just sort of brand new, and we were all like, oh my God, this is amazing. I mean, we were, oh my God, this is amazing 10 days ago too. But we've been at this for 21 years now, so it's not quite, we know how hard it is to get to those 3 first places. So it is so fulfilling. Like, it is very gratifying that we were able to get that. It's something that I didn't think that we would ever be able to do, and would be very hard to ever do again. There was a bit of luck involved there too, as you know, so especially with the varietal. I think the geishas stood on their own and they did great, but the varietal is an iffy thing, and so it was great. I mean, everything got aligned, and we were able to take that. But yeah, no, it was much more gratifying, I think, than, I don't know. They were both very gratifying.
Let's talk about BOP for a second. Talk about BOP 2025 for more than a second. It deserves more than a second.
All right.
What, for people that might be watching this that don't know what the best of Panama is, which I would be surprised if anybody watching this doesn't know, but for a quick brief, nationwide coffee competition, a producer can submit into the geisha washed category, geisha natural category, and the traditional or varietal category.
Any members of SCAP, which has changed, actually. It used to be that you could not be a member and you could submit a sample and compete. Now you need to be a member of SCAP to compete. We had new rules this year where you could only submit exactly one geisha. Every farm or every farm or family unit could compete with one geisha washed, one geisha natural, and one varietal.
They're best of each.
They're best of each category, because if you have multiple farms, you could choose from any farm you wanted, but you wanted to put the best in because you only get that one chance.
Right. Which in a way made
it not so much more.
It is so much more.
Because last year we could compete with 2 geisha washed, 2 geisha naturals, and 2 varietals. Right.
And so what is the process for somebody that might be watching this? What does the process look like of selecting a coffee to go into the best of Panama? How did you decide on the 3 coffees that you ended with that, have these amazing awards now associated with them?
Well, we knew that last year our favorite coffee by far had been the Nilo. It was in our own private auction, but we had a much smaller production of it. So when we saw that we had enough of a production of this to be able to put in the best of Panama, we focused on processing that for the best of Panama, which means in the washed, depulp it right away, make sure that it's not going to have any flavors of processed coffee in the washed variety. And the natural, just we floated it and then put it into the climate control room and dried it very slowly.
Okay.
The varietal, we had about 3 different choices, because last year we competed with a Gigante that we really liked. This year we didn't have enough of the Gigante, actually. We had a Tumaco that we compared it with. And we are going to always cup these coffees against each other together to see which one we think has. First of all, it has to be like a jasmine bomb, because otherwise the judges will just go over it. And if it doesn't have that jasmine, it sort of explodes. You have much less chances in the aromatics. And in the fragrance too. If you can break it and it has jasmine coming out, you're doing great.
Versus 20 years ago, you're getting kicked out for being
Exactly. It's exactly the opposite. There you say that. And then after that, you just want to make sure that it cools very well, still having whatever attributes you had in it, be it stone fruit, bergamot, and lemongrass, or in the natural, let's say it has more cherry raspberry to it. And so we were going to cup them against each other. The highest elevation was the Nilo. We were going back and forth. Again, we did have one option of natural of Gigante, but in the end, it ended up being exactly the same cut, which we call it, which means that the winners of natural and washed geisha was exactly the same harvest. It was our 7th harvest of the Nilo. We had enough to process the 7th cut in both washed and natural, and we did that, and we chose the exact same, because we had a Nilo 5 and a Nilo. We had different Nilos that we could have worked with, or 4. I can't remember which ones were washed and natural. And we chose in a blind cupping the 7 washed and 7 natural, and that's and for the varietal it's a little different. We had an SL34 that was really nice, but the Laurina was our favorite in the end, so we put the Laurina in.
Good thing you did that, eh?
Good thing we did that, yeah.
When you taste something like Laurina, you don't produce a lot of it. You have, to my knowledge, kind of the 3 primary varietals: SL34, Pacamata, Laurina.
Yeah.
And then Catuai, of course.
Right. Which was not going to go.
Which was not going to go. Do you look at something like Laurina, see the results, and as a coffee producer, do you immediately consider we should plant more of this? Demand is going to be up. We need to increase supply. How do you look at that on a business perspective?
Well, last year our Laurina came in, I want to say 5th. I don't remember exactly in varietal.
I think you're right. I was trying to buy that.
And yes, and people were all of a sudden like, we want more Laurina. So we did start planting. I think the year before last and last year we started planting a little bit more. It's in Jaramillo though. It's not well. We also took out some mocha that we had. We had mocha up in El Velo for a while. It didn't really work out as well as it's worked out for other people, so we took it out and we put Laurina there as well. But we might end up taking out both the SL34 we have in Cañas Verdes, and it does better in Cañas Verdes, I think. And the Pacamara, I don't know. The Pacamara seems to be going in all directions, so I'm not sure. But we might take out and just leave Laurina in El Velo, if possible, because it does very well there.
Looking at the whole portfolio that you offer, how important is it for you to have non-geishas within your realm of offering?
It's just interesting for other people, but our business runs on geisha,
right?
So it wouldn't pay the bills. Let's put it that way. It's for people who want to have Esmeralda, but they can't really they can't really hit the price point of the geisha. It's a good thing. So we sell a bit of it here in Panama City too, and it's very popular. I mean, if we had more, we would definitely be able to sell a lot more of those. People pre-order, and they can pre-order one box because we don't have enough for everybody.
I've been fighting for it all year, just for reference. So when you look on like the business perspective, I don't think a lot of people understand the business lens of a coffee farm or producing coffee as a whole. When you make a discovery like Geisha, 20 years ago, does that all of a sudden trigger in your mind, rip everything else out and let's go full blast and produce this thing? Or how do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what happened in 2004 was that we were like, well, it's going to be a fad. I mean, are people going to be in love with it?
Going to be
Everybody was kind of like, is this really going to be lasting? Or is it just a fad?
Interesting. Okay.
So we waited 2005, 2006, and 2007, we planted up here in Cañas Verdes.
Okay.
The Fundador was the first one in Cañas Verdes. And then we started planting more as we saw that it was continuing to be a fad for a while. And now I don't think it's a fad anymore.
I don't know if those things are in a fad. No.
Yeah.
And at that point, are other people also planting geisha, or you're still maybe the only one?
No. So in 2006, we started, or 2004 was we won. 2005, a bunch of people started asking for seed. My dad gave a seed to everybody who asked or who came by to get some, which were a lot of people, Central America, South America, and all of our neighbors around here. But other farmers started to discover on their farm geisha as well, because geisha was brought through a government movement to just make the genetic base of coffee here in Panama larger, because we had purely like Bourbon Típica descendants. And so there was a lot of coffee left over from the 70s that had been planted on different farms, and people had sort of conserved it, but it wasn't their main harvest because it's such a low yielding cultivar that most people just got rid of it in the 70s, because when they saw that the yield was nothing compared to a Catuai, they just eliminated it.
Right. And coffee
says
$1 a pound.
Yes. And what are you going to do with this low yield? Nobody cared about. Well, we didn't know really about flavor in the 70s at all. Like, people would come from Germany and buy full container loads, but here in Panama, nobody really knew. Nobody really learned how to cup until the early 2000s, when everybody here learned how to cup.
And do you think that the education of cupping totally changed the dynamic here?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You just saw the whole platform.
Yeah, because we could make decisions on our own without having to put it in front of somebody else and be like, oh, yeah. I was super happy to do the queue, because then I could see what coffees were like from African coffees or the Colombian coffees. The queue had all of these different origins that I had never had a chance to taste. So that gave me an idea of what different coffees could taste like. And then coming back here and cupping, I was like, okay, the qualities of then we started deciding, okay, the Palmira coffee is not doing great. That was
Back to
900,000
900
meters.
meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, tons of diseases because of the elevation and heat and all that kind of stuff. And so we started getting out of the Palmira coffees, and we have the Diamond Mountain, which is a Catuai that's a 1,400 meters. Honestly, now the Catuai, we've talked about getting out of the Catuai. The varietals would be much more interesting. Our Catuai is by far our most accessible offering, but it also gets hit by bad weather and things like that. Last year, we lost a lot of the Catuai because 1,400 meters in Jaramillo just got a lot of rain. So yeah, I don't know about the Catuai. What if we're going to continue to have that as an offering, or if we'll eventually.
So when you look at the perspective of the portfolio as a whole,
Yeah,
Geisha is like 95% of what you're known for today. Would that be appropriate?
yeah.
And do you think there is value in lowering that number?
Yeah.
And trying to find other things to plant and just open the door to, you said, accessibility with the varietals or exploration, I suppose.
See, I think at the lower elevations where the Geisha is not going to be quite so brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
there's more space for that, especially for Ethiopian heirloom varieties. Things like we planted recently. Mario Fonseca gave us some, what's it called? Pink Bourbon.
Okay, yeah.
And I think we had some Chiroso that Hunter gave us and things like that we could plant around 1,600 meters or 1,500 meters. I do think that it is nice to have other offerings. I like to have other offerings for people, but our main offering is the Geisha for sure. And that's what people know us for. Going back, we're going to go back to 2005, F4 and talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
people back then were like, $21 a pound, and that's crazy, and this and that. It took us until 2009 to be able, we were in the red in coffee for years before that already, because, we would contract out full containers like everybody else did, but the prices were fixed by the sea, and the sea did not cover our cost of production. So it was kind of a crazy business, but I guess it was diversifying a little bit. And back then we didn't know what would happen, but it took us a full until 2009 to get into the black. So that it wasn't as people think that that's just one quick jump and that's great because all of a sudden you're famous or some, but no, it took a while. It took until after our first private auction. Yeah. And so I am always going to look at where we're selling and make sure that always trying to not keep all of our eggs in one basket, both. And yes, I guess that in that sense, I don't know. I don't think that the popularity of the Geisha will really go down mostly in Asian countries that quickly. I think they do like it a lot, and they don't have a problem with prices because
I don't think it's a fad.
Yeah, no, get back.
I don't think it's a fad. I think it's here to stay.
Yeah. We have I think, I don't know if you've seen them, but in the farm in El Velo, we have 400 different accessions. Those 400 different accessions, Daniel and I cup out occasion on. We're supposed to do it once a year. We've never had the 400 accessions at once. We get usually 200 in a year because they don't all produce enough to be able to cup or whatever. But we have chosen a couple of those, 3 of those, in fact, and planted them also here in Jaramillo and Cañas Verdes. And they haven't really grown that well so far, but we're hoping that we're going to get some nice.
You do like a half hectare or hectare of each and see what happens.
I don't know exactly. You say it's probably half a hectare. Yeah. And see in a few years when we cup it out, what does that taste like? Is that great? When we cup those 400 accessions, we used to put a Geisha in the middle just to make sure. But we've never found anything that we actually like more than the Geisha. But then again, there's only 10 to 12 plants of each one. So maybe if it grew out and it had, more space and it could produce, and it was at a different elevation, I don't know, maybe it'll do better. So
Okay.
I do have kind of high hopes on that as well. I think that might turn out well.
So you have some amount of belief that there is the next geisha.
Yeah, or that we're just gonna have different, accession. Well, we're gonna have to call it something eventually, not just a number. But I do think that there is a lot of space for that.
Yeah.
Just something that's not geisha, but that's interesting too.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I think being here in Panama and getting to try non-geishas, there's a level of excitement that's like, oh wow, this is a very high scoring, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's competing with maybe the geishas at that
table.
farm, at that table, whatever that situation looks like.
Yeah, whenever there's a coffee that can actually compete with the good geishas, that's pretty amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember there was a day here earlier this year that I think there was maybe 2 Lorena on a table with geishas.
Yeah.
And we were going through the debrief at the end, and you went, oh shit, I scored this Lorena up there with the geishas. Yeah. I would be so curious to know if that was the Lorena
that we ended up putting in.
Ended up going in and took the whole.
I don't know, but I certainly didn't recognize it there.
Well, there it competed with the geishas, right?
Yeah. And for those who think that people that the national jury is somehow, we are judges and jury. So, you know, I scored it an 87, the Laurina, the one that took everything, because I did not recognize it on that table. So there were a lot of good coffees there. That was good too. I put floral or whatever, but I did not give it a hugely, high score. So I do think that us national jury are also learning things and talking about the accessions. I mean, Ricardo Poiner had a coffee in there that we ended up, or from Cotowa, that ended up not passing because the national jury had never tasted it before, and we ended up
thinking it
didn't belong in that category, unfortunately. Right. And it did. So yeah, education, and we're gonna have to figure out that varietals category. So for context, in the varietal category, you cannot put a geisha. So when there's all these highly floral coffees coming in, people don't really know if they're geishas or not. Land-raised varieties are almost always floral. Everyone is floral, as far as I know. The ones that we have here in Panama are all floral. So it was kicked out because we didn't really know what it was. And but now we can do genetic testing too and get these results back as quickly as possible.
The genetics, obviously very important.
Yeah.
Do you test, you I assume, are keeping your own seed, you're doing the whole thing in a cycle for when you plant new areas, new regions. Do you test your own geisha genetic as you run through these cycles every year?
Good question. No, and we've tested our geishas and had different results in different farms. Let's say Montaña comes back with a different result than Jaramillo and El Verde.
And when you say different result, like a small percentage of...
I'm not a geneticist or a scientist, but it has to do with one allele, I think they're called, being different than the others.
Okay.
So it comes back as being something like 87% Panama Geisha, which is super weird because that is a coffee that has won most of the... Like Montaña has been traditionally the one that has taken the most BOP first places in the latter years, not in the earlier years. In the earlier years, it was always Mario. And then, so I don't know why.
87%. Does it tell you what the 13 is?
No.
No.
It just basically says that it's 87% accession 27-22, which is Panama Geisha.
Yeah, okay. And is there any coffee that you have that would be 100%?
Yeah, the ones from Jaramillo and El Velo. And you know what's super weird about this too? Is that when World Research Center, Coffee Research Center, like World Coffee Research, started doing those testings, they took coffee. I mean, it wasn't the best place, but they took some from the front of the Beneficio that was geisha, and they took some from up in El Velo. So that's what they tested with so many years later for accession 27-22. That's the reference
point. I see.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
You're talking like right here in front of the Beneficio?
Right here.
The single
geisha tree that's right there. And I think they took leaves and maybe I forget where else from both places. And then they came back with the reference of, or whatever the genetic composition was, of 27, 22.
Okay.
And then at one point, we all sent in geishas to see what's going on. We weren't the only ones that had that strange result.
Okay.
So it is something that Panama coffees should be looking into more, I guess, on a yearly basis. And we should probably too, to understand, because according to the geneticists, if coffees, I mean, we know that coffees are self-pollinating, but we also know that there's bees that can pollinate another tree with one of the other ones. So specifically, they would have to take that one bean, make a
like a cat's-eye to a geisha.
Yeah, and they would have to take the bean from that to be able to make the nursery and grow out the plant, and that one theoretically could have some sort of a genetic difference.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
So one of the things that the geneticist says, which we do not do that well here in Panama in general, is keep the varieties separate. You've seen them. We have them basically one right next to each other. Yeah, they're close to each other. So it's something we're gonna have to keep an eye out for and see what happens with that.
Yeah, interesting. A little Lorena geisha hybridization maybe come in.
Yeah. And in Montaña, we had some very old Típica trees up there.
Okay.
When we planted the geisha. So that is also a possibility.
Interesting. So if you're watching this and you've got different coffees on your farm planted, in sequential rows, it might be cross-pollinating and having a little hybridization going on. You might have your own genetic.
Yeah,
things.
Unique. Yeah. But I don't even know how you would know. I guess they would be able to tell us Laudina. I don't know. Yeah. But Laudina is basically a Típica Bourbon descendant.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Do you find geisha when you first tasted it is different to geisha how you taste it now?
I find geisha when I first tasted it very similar to what it is now. We were learning how to roast it because at the beginning you got over roasted and you lost all the florality and you lost all of the flavors in the cup. But once we got that down a little bit, I think it's similar. I don't think it's that different. At least in my memory, it's more or less the same.
Right. How far do you think geisha can go?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've certainly gone a long way so far, so I don't know how much further this could go. Super high elevation geishas that have very, very good taste profiles.
There will always be a place.
Maybe it depends how far is tea gone. I don't know, because I feel like that is where the geishas get taken by people who have no problems paying, for example, for very high-end teas that have always cost a lot of money.
Okay.
So it depends. I think it depends a lot on the country or on the customs and the people who have what their traditions are, like what they value.
Right. So the Asian market being
the Asian market
right now,
yeah,
and having a long-standing culture
of tea.
Tea, correct. Interesting. I suppose in a way the delicacy of the profile too, and
yeah, exactly, the complexity of it and finding certain notes and the legacy of it, of where it comes from, and so there's a whole bunch of components there that add up.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask you the big question. You set records in terms of scores.
Yeah.
So 98 points in the washed category.
Amazing.
Crazy. Near perfect coffee. 97 in the natural category, which was the new record in the morning of the competition. And then the 98 beat out the 97. So 2 records broken in one day.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. We're going into the auction. The auction is August 6th.
7th in Asia, 6th in here. Yeah.
6th here. Record price, I believe, is just over $10,000 a kilo in the best of Panama. how far do you think Nido can possibly go? What is the level? And if you prefer not to put a number and
Not to
and
speculate
get
on
the
it.
tail on the donkey here,
I don't necessarily want to put a number on the tail of the donkey, but I do think that the wash is going to go for higher than the natural for some reason, just because the wash has a 98.
okay.
But I might be completely wrong because the natural is very nice as well. So, but I do feel that the tendency is sort of going a little bit back towards the washed coffee.
Mm.
Depending on the markets and it was very, very natural for a while. And then people are sort of coming around to washed.
Cleaner, more classic, more.
And we also, I mean, yeah, cleaner, more classic. All the fruits or all the elements of the attributes in the cup being very evident in a washed coffee. I mean, they're evident in a natural as well, but you're going to have more fruitiness and you still have the florality. I know they're just different,
right?
I guess. It depends on whether or not also the people want to buy these together, like the three of them. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen because it's never happened before. It's never happened the three first places. So
I really like the psychology of buying all
three. I like it too, but I don't know. Somebody being able to offer all three
and doing all three, I think would be super fascinating, and getting to offer that.
I think that would be super fun too.
In a service experience somewhere in the world would just be.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we just gotta wait and see. Wait and see.
Wait and see.
Hopefully it does well. I think it'll do. I think it'll do pretty well. But I don't know. Those records are crazy. You know, those are some very high priced coffees. So
for sure. I think you said earlier, there's the business side, there's the marketing side. I think a little bit the prices go that high for marketing. If we're being honest, people want their name to be on the board. They want to be associated with,
yes,
you know, Geisha Natural #1, Geisha Wash #1, all three coffees #1.
I guess you could do an event and try and get back some of that money, but it just seems like those prices are very hard to actually make a business out of.
You know, I've been thinking, like, I've been lifting the mattress and the couches in my house
See
how much
under there.
I can find. How amazing it would be for, you know, my brand or anybody's brand to have their name on all three.
Yeah.
And to be able to talk about.
Yeah, no, it would be super cool.
X amount of money that I was able to throw at this thing, and I didn't buy a house because of that. And, you know, it's so now I live in my car. But
I have all this great coffee.
Too funny.
I have seen that what happens in auctions too. It's like then they'll divide it between so many people that you only have to deal with. But still, at those prices, a small quantity can be a hefty price tag.
Yeah. I bought a Geisha wash last year in the BOP. It was the Sophia #2.
Oh, yeah.
It was, I think, 4,000 a kilo.
Uh-huh.
And I was selling it for $200 a cup.
Oh, wow.
And a cup would be smaller than this mug that we're currently drinking out of. And at first I was like, this is crazy. Nobody's going to buy this.
Did you sell it in Canada?
No, I sold it in Asia.
In Hokkaido?
In a mix. I was in Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Japan.
Uh-huh.
There's maybe 6 different events.
Yeah.
I think I had 20 cups worth or something like that after roasting. I didn't buy the full kilo. And I believe I sold all but 1 or 2. And
that is amazing. Like that people are willing to pay $200 a cup is insane.
It blew my mind. And,
I'm sorry, not insane. It's crazy to me. Like I don't even pay like 200. I don't know. Yeah, it is. But it's great. It's great that our industry values.
Of course.
Because Sophia is amazing coffee too. I remember that coffee from last year.
So I think any of the coffees that are in the BOP should be an unbelievable experience. And if, in my opinion, if they can get paired with, you know, more than a paper cup and a takeaway. They can get paired with some sort of service experience and hospitality addition. Yeah,
certainly a paper cup is not the ideal.
Definitely not the ideal. Something I was doing for this BOP service, so I would do it in a V60.
Mm-hmm.
I did it all with hand grinder, so I knew that when I went to these different venues to do my pop-up, I knew the calibration already on the hand grinder.
Right.
I don't want to waste any of that coffee.
No, yeah.
And what I would do is I would keep the V60 after I brewed, leave it off to the side, and going back to your tea comment, I would flush it again and just sort of see what happens. And I sort of tried this with...
Were you able to get two?
I wouldn't get like a whole nother brew. So my recipe was, I think...
That is very tea-like. I've never even thought of doing anything like that.
I was doing 13 grams to 200. And then I think I would run another 50 or 75 grams of water through whatever is left. And there would be an astringency and there would be like a very soft quality to it, but it's also very pleasant and very drinkable and very still sweet. There's florals, there's complexity, and it's like, why not? Yeah. You got the lemons, make the lemon.
Yeah, definitely.
Those are expensive.
Yes. Expensive.
Very
grinding outlet. Yeah.
But I found in doing that, people were also more appreciative toward like the value proposition. Right. I would serve them in the cup, and then I would have to re-engage with them later on saying, how you doing? You're quiet over here. You're staring at the wall. Are you okay? Do you want to try this? It's kind of weird, but do you want to try it? And everybody was like, yeah. And so I think bringing more experience into the service of that, I think drives the value and the purpose up a little bit more.
Yeah.
In my mind.
I think that's great that you were able to do that. I always wonder what people do after they buy those super expensive coffees, other than maybe gift it to their friend. That's pretty good.
It's definitely a tough market to participate in. I think in Canada, if I put that in the menu of one of our coffee shops, we would have some backlash.
Some comment on that.
For sure. But very exciting. Do you want to talk a little bit about your auction this year?
Sure. Our auction is on August 21st, both here and in Asia. So it starts super early in the morning here at 3 a.m. We're actually don't have our auction boxes yet, but we're almost sold out. So just had to put a pause on that. All of this, obviously, industry recognition because of the first three places has made it a lot more interesting to buyers than it has maybe been on previous years.
Right.
So, we're doing that on August 21st. We call it Floral Experience. We have coffees that we've paired with we have different floralities in coffees where they're not necessarily paired, but all the coffees are very floral. So we have 16 different coffees that are going to be sampled in a sample box. And then we've got one coffee, which is very, very small, not enough for samples. We have the coffee itself. It's called the Box of Eden because the nano area is called Eden. But we've got 3 different processes in it, only 200 grams of each process. So there's a wash, there's a honey, and there's a natural. Actually, there's 800 grams. So maybe there's 2 naturals. I don't remember that right now. Or maybe there's more than 200 of one of them. In any case, it's very small, but it's also it's the first time that coffee has ever, or that lot has ever come out. And so we are excited about the Box of Eden too. Now, it can't be sampled because we didn't have enough, but yeah. So it's 17 coffees in total in our auction. And they're super good. You've tasted them. They're really, really good, floral, complete, complex, good and chilled. They are cold kind of coffees.
And I think also worth mentioning, the coffees in the auction were the contenders versus the coffee you submit into the Best of Panama.
Yeah, for sure.
So anything that didn't make it into the BOP
is
now in the auction, and therefore should be of a very similar or contending type of quality to what we see in the BOP.
Yeah. Especially the nano lots. There's some that are not. I don't remember We have Leon in there, maybe. I don't remember right now offhand all of the ones that we have in there, but most of them are nano lots, and most of them are going to be very, 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 very nice. Which just reminded me of the M&M Oops. But
Oops. We don't have to go into that. So that's a good mistake. So participate in the auction, watch the BOP auction to see what happens there, and then, slide 2 weeks later and check under the other mattress in your house to see if you can find some more cash. And look to get some of the coffees here. Brilliant, I think is a great word to use to describe. Before we wrap everything up, I got a few more questions.
Go ahead.
Not really coffee related.
Okay.
One, when you were growing up, what did you want to be? There's no way you wanted to be a coffee producer and the most notorious geisha producer in the world.
If I could have chosen anything without any reality check at all.
Yeah.
Either a gymnast or a singer.
A gymnast or a singer?
Both of those things I love very much. I love gymnastics and I love singing.
What type of music would you do?
I love singers like Lady Gaga or like Adele. Obviously, I do not have that ability. But yeah, I would have been that type of a singer if I could have. But obviously reality is a lot harder than that. So when I went to college, I was like, okay, now what do I? Now I really have to decide what I want to do. And I didn't even in college know what I wanted to do. I ended up getting a degree in psychology and French. Those were my 2 majors in college. Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly because I had enough, I had enough points or whatever, academic, whatever
credits.
Credits,
yeah.
So, yeah. I wasn't very motivated. I took French. I already knew a lot of French, so French was going to be sort of an easy subject. But I did not know what I wanted to do. And before I came back to work in coffee, did a bunch of I worked in marketing at the very beginning. Well, actually, first off, I worked here in Panama at Mota, which is a big company out of the free zone. And then I worked in a marketing company in Puerto Rico. And then I started having kids, and I worked as a translator, and then I worked as a commercial real estate appraiser, and a whole bunch of small things which were definitely not what I had dreamed of doing when I was a child growing up here.
Lived many lives before coming into the world of coffee.
Yes, exactly. I was 30-something when I actually came into coffee. So
okay,
yeah.
What does the end game look like for you? Is this, is coffee something that you see yourself doing until your very last day, or is there a moment like a triple crown in the best of Panama?
Triple crown, best of Panama.
Drop the smoke bomb and
mic drop, and I'm out.
Yeah.
I've thought about that. I'm not even gonna lie about that. I have thought about that. It's like, oh, if I'm gonna leave, this is the perfect moment to be done with coffee.
I was joking about it, but I'm glad.
And I even wonder, should we compete anymore in the BOP? Where can we go from here? Really? Where can we go from here? But anyway, I do not know if I think that as I get older, traveling is a lot more of a hassle, and maybe I think I might continue on coffee for a while, but maybe just less being everywhere all the time.
Less intensive on the schedule.
Less intensive on the expos, less intensive on the constant, people coming through here, cupping. Maybe just delegate a little bit more, which is a bit of a challenge to find people that'll come all the way out here and live here and work. And we do have, a couple of Newt's team members this year, which is great. Yeah. But I think we need 1 or 2 more.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about expos?
Yes.
Yeah? Because you love expos.
They love them. Well, I'm at every single one. So
Did the camera get your eyes going?
You've been doing expos for 20,
Yes,
25 years?
20 years, because I started, well, maybe 22 years, because I started going to the expos before we won the Best of Panama. The Best of Panama was 21 years ago.
Okay.
So I really started full time as part of my job. Let's see, the first, other than the US, which we always went to that expo, the first expo outside of the US that I went to was in Japan in 2006.
Okay.
And I might have gone to Europe before that. I'm not sure. But the European Expo in 2006, at least, was teeny. They were very, very small. It was nothing like the expos. Now, of course, I'd never been to an Asian expo. I went for the first time to Hotel X in 2016, and that is just another world and crazy. And I don't remember if I was already going to Korea. Yeah, we started going to Korea maybe in 2014. A little before China, and Taiwan even earlier than that. But expos have picked up in the last 5, I don't know, maybe, no, pre-COVID, we were already going to all these expos, but now there's more. Now there's World of Coffees.
Yeah, there's maybe 5 or 6 premier expos a year.
Yeah, there's
maybe 190.
I mean, now there's Dubai, there's Hotel X, there's the World of Coffee Asia, which will be Bangkok. Then we go to Europe, then we go to Japan, then we go to Korea, and then we go to Taiwan. So I would say that for us, those are the 7 main ones, but there's more that you could go to if you're looking. There is tons. Yeah.
What do you find is the value as a already very well recognized coffee producer that has roots into all of these markets that we just listed? What is the value of going every year and having that presence?
I think that a lot of people say, oh, maybe you should stop. Maybe you shouldn't be so visible. Maybe you should be more, let's say, less out there all the time, more, not secretive, but less accessible, I guess.
Okay.
Because that would bring mystique and all that. But in my experience, being out there and being able to explain to people in person how we do things has been effective so far. It's exhausting, and expos, sometimes you go to them and you're like, why did I come? Because you don't even have 5 minutes to talk to like one person because there's so many people around you.
Yep.
But always being there, always reminding people that Esmeralda is there, I think is also important, or a value. I don't know. I think those are things that we have to reconsider as years go by. Like, is that something that is still worth our while, or should we be going to different places? But it certainly is, exhausting. It's a lot of travel, and it's a lot of work once you get there.
Yeah. And then it's late nights, dinners,
yeah, exactly. And
arguably those are more important than the show floor.
Than the show itself, exactly.
And the real conversations.
And then you spend 2 days on an airplane and you're exhausted, and you get back, and I don't know. I do think it's important, though. I think you meet a lot of people at those expos that you would not necessarily otherwise meet, and that's important, but it doesn't necessarily have to always be me. It could be team members too. Well,
somebody you're representing.
We recently didn't go to Jakarta, and Burrell and Park and a bunch of people really helped us out there. So, because I couldn't manage it, I was like, I'm too exhausted. I can't go to Jakarta. And there was this whole team that helped us take over, and it's super nice.
Right. Which is kind of fun to get your clients to represent your clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
If I was a new coffee producer, I just bought a farm, let's say last year, I'm figuring out what to do.
Here in Panama?
Sure.
What elevation?
Okay. Let's say it starts at 1,500 and goes to 2,000. I got a nice piece of land.
Okay.
Where would you recommend I start? Where do I begin? What do I do?
I would start with Geisha.
Yeah.
Panama's known for Geisha. People come here looking for Geisha. That's really what they want. And you can have other offerings, but I think that it's very difficult to be here and not have Geisha. It's hard to sell.
Now, 1,500 to 2,000, obviously push the Geisha as high up there as I
can. Yes, exactly. And then
at what elevation would you say don't plant geisha? Like if I shifted that all down by 200 meters and 1800 was my
Top,
top.
I would probably not go under 1600 meters with geisha. I think that as we're evolving with geishas, the elevations are just becoming much more visible, or you can sense them. But sensorially, you can taste the coffees that are from a higher elevation.
Right, more complexity, more clarity, more
Just through and through. No matter how many times you go through, it'll just like hit you again, even backwards and forwards. And then when it's cold, you can still taste it. Whereas if you're at 1400 or 1500 meters, it can be good, but it's hard to make it just stand out like that it'll be good from beginning to end. Having said that, we obviously have some coffees at that elevation. We do our best with them in the processing to make them dry slowly. And there are people who want coffees that are not super high elevation, want geishas for making espresso, for example. A lot of the times they don't want the highest elevation. They think it's too acidic, and they prefer a 1500 meter geisha. But
interesting.
If I was you and I didn't have already that planted, I would use, and you went up to 1800, I would use 16 to 18 in geisha and 14. Let's say you start, whatever you start, let's say 14 to 16, I would use different land races. I would look for Chirofos and Bourbon Pointous and all those kind of things. Okay. And I would put interesting, different varietals in that you think that have some potential.
Okay. Do you weigh out in terms of quality versus quantity on like selection? If I, as an example, geisha, high quality, low quantity.
Yes.
Chiroso is maybe a little bit of both. It's got good quality and good quantity. It's a good understanding. How much do you let that play into the decision? Or is that something that doesn't really matter for?
Well, more than anything else, the people who buy the super high elevation and that are, or in the auctions or buying directly from me and are buying high quality coffees, I try to avoid, it's not entirely in my hands, but I try to avoid them having to compete with people who are getting the coffee for a much more accessible price. So I have 3 now direct trade qualities, which would be the nano lots, which are all the high elevation ones.
Yeah. So
that have a certain Nido, Eden, Gigante, Valle, Manantial for now. Manantial eventually will not be a nano lot. It's only this year because it's the first time it's produced in that farm, but that farm is going to have a high production. So anyway, so we've got those nano lots, which we sell 1 kilo of each. And then we've got our Esmeralda Special, which is our main brand. And it's in Asia, they call it the red label, and that's a 10 kilo box. And that is what I put the most efforts into in terms of quality that's not the super high elevation. So I want those to be at least 92 points or more on my judging scale. Of course, we all have different judging scales, but on my cupping scale, I want it to be 92 points or more. And then we have the private collection, which is a blend by farm. So a blend of washed and separately a blend of natural from Cañas Verdes, a blend of washed and a blend of natural from El Vero, a blend of washed and a blend of natural from from Jaramillo. And those are about half the price of the Esmeralda Special. They're good, but in my opinion, when I'm looking for clarity and all of the notes to show of what I'm looking for, the Esmeralda Special definitely has a lot over the private collection. The private collection is nice. It's a good representation of a geisha, but it's not this unique micro lot flavor. And the nano lots are even more of that because they're of the high elevation of the nano lots. So you don't want to have a ton of coffee that's not so great competing with the coffee that is really good if you want to keep your reputation.
I see. Yeah.
So, which is why I would work from 14 to 16 with something different that's not going to mess with your reputation from 16 to 18.
Okay.
And yes, higher production is important. And yes, something interesting like a tiroso or a sidra or a laurina or, a variety of different ones, even better because people like to have different things to choose from.
Yeah, right. Okay, so spread the portfolio and
Yeah, I guess if I had bought that farm, that's what I would do. And if I didn't have anything else planted on it because it's already planted, then you kind of want to take advantage of that too.
right. No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And then if I move out of Panama and buy the farm elsewhere, it's probably a whole different answer.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yes.
Entirely different. And in Panama, you even want to see there's so many different microregions here. So we've got so many different weather patterns, and we've got 3 main farms where we produce geisha, which I just mentioned: Jaramillo, El Velo, which is an Alto Kiel, and Cañas Verdes, which is a higher elevation of Palmira. And all three of these farms have completely different
Taste profile.
Taste profile, microclimates. And the ones in Cañas Verdes and Jaramillo are much closer to the Pacific Ocean, whereas the one in Alto Kiel is much closer to the Caribbean or the Atlantic. And the weather patterns, the microclimate, much more recent volcanic soil in Cañas Verdes versus older volcanic soil in Jaramillo. Everything is part of the how this is going to manifest, or how the geisha profile is going to taste. And obviously the microorganisms that we have and the flora and the fauna in the area. So all of those different varieties are interesting to people. People like to be able to choose and taste, and obviously storytelling behind each one.
Yes.
And understanding, where they come from and why they're different. And Mario, when I first, and still when I taste it sometimes, Mario is like a perfume. Like it can have a perfume quality to it, where you really feel like you have like a Chanel No. 5 or something. Okay. Very perfume. Cup might not last as long because Mario is 1500 or up to 1650, 1600. All of our elevations precisely, but it is very perfumed at the beginning, so it can have that. It's just that it's not going to go as stone cold as well as a 1800 meter coffee, like Wow
or
Nido,
yeah,
which is even higher than that. Yeah,
I remember capping it at EFP, and I kept, I think, till an hour and 5 minutes or something. And it was still beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was one of my first experiences, I think, fully convinced that this is terroir.
Yeah.
The natural category in the morning, the wash category in the afternoon, and just comparing my notes one versus the other, but not consciously.
Yeah.
As I did the evaluation after the fact and thinking, shit, this is from the same place.
Yeah.
I
remember thinking that too. This is whatever this is. Because in that moment, huge contenders for first place were Finca Sofia, Totumas, Los Cenizos. There's a couple of very good high elevation farms that I was thinking that could have been as well. But I also believed that they both came, whatever they were, they both came from the same place.
The core of them was.
Yeah, it was very terroir oriented. Exactly. It was absolutely. It felt like it was from the same place, which was why we're during the dinner, or the what's it called? The awards dinner, the awards gala. When we got first place Geisha Natural, I was like, oh wow, we have great first place Geisha Wash too. But then I was like, okay, calm down, breathe. It might not. You might be wrong. It might not seem. It might be a different place. But then when they called everybody who it could have, like when they called, I think Totumas, they called Sofia, they called Cenizos. I was like, okay, I don't know. It could be somebody, but it seems like it's likely going to be us. And yeah, fortunately it was. That was very exciting.
You were very excited.
I was very excited.
I've got a great video clip that maybe we can clip into this podcast. I was sitting across the row, like across the alleyway, the aisle,
The aisle, yeah.
and I could see Rachel. She's one row ahead of me, right on the aisle. I'm on the aisle over here. And
You could see me breathing probably before that, like Daniel, what do you think? Daniel was right next to me. We were talking to you, saying, oh my gosh. Oh, and then when they called us, and then of course we knew at that point that we'd taken the Panama Cup because there's no way there was anybody else.
Possibility.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a great moment.
That was a great moment. It was cool to be there, cool to witness, and I think a special moment for lots of people.
It was greater for us because of the 20 years. So it's taken us so long. I mean, we have been competing every year. We compete every year. We don't, well, there's 2 years out of these 20 that we didn't compete. 1 year was when it was our first auction that I didn't compete. And then I was president of SCAP and we decided not to compete that year in 2011, I think it was. But every other year we've competed. So people sometimes ask us, why do you keep competing? Everybody knows who you are. But you're going to kind of disappear if you don't continue, I think. I don't know.
There's such a strange psychology in the world of coffee where people say that. Why do you keep competing?
Yeah.
Nobody knows who you are. It's like,
yeah, and
tell Tiger Woods that. You know?
Yeah, they say that to us all the time. And like, what could you possibly gain from you? I'm like, well, what are we supposed to do if we don't compete?
Tell Serena Williams.
Stop it.
I don't know who you are. Why are you?
Why are you competing? Yeah.
It's like, no.
I don't know. But yeah, I would find it very hard to not compete just because it's fun. I guess that is the word. It's just fun. If you don't compete, it's so boring. What am I going to do when all the international judges come and everybody's talking about the best of Panama and we're not even understanding what they're talking about?
It gives you a purpose, I think, from what I saw being here this year. It gives you a bit of a purpose through the course of the season that you're like, ooh, this is really nice. Let's hold that.
Exactly.
Ooh, what's this over here? Hello.
That's always on our brain. Like, okay, could this be BOP? That's our first client. Our first client is always BOP.
Right.
Yeah, as you know.
Yeah. Ooh, I love this coffee.
Yeah.
Can I buy this, Rachel? No, it's BOP.
Or yes, and then no, sorry.
I faced that.
I did. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll circle back into the auction and I'll see if I find some cash in it.
There you go. That's great. That's a great idea.
I have one more question.
Okay.
And then we can wrap it up.
Okay.
You work with your family.
Yes.
It's a family business.
Yes.
Can you maybe shed a bit of light into the trials and tribulations of
working in family business?
Yeah.
So, my dad's had moved here in 73 and he was running everything. Then when my brother came back from college, he wanted to join. So he ended up becoming the general manager and working with my dad. Then my dad kind of stepped away and left the board or the ownership to, there's three of us. I have an older brother called Eric, my brother Daniel, and myself.
Yeah.
And we basically make the decisions on a board level most of the time. We meet 4 times a year and we make decisions. We don't always agree on things, that's for sure. It can be very difficult because then when you're fighting with somebody, you're not just fighting with your boss or whatever, you're fighting with your family or
right.
And so those things can be a little hard. My daughter came back and worked with me for the last 3 years, which was really great. She's actually going away in August to get an NDA for 2 years, which is horrifying to me because I have come to depend on her for choosing coffees and for the cupping tables, for doing writing up the cupping notes, doing fact sheets, or helping me teach here, going to expos. She's gone to a zillion expos with me, even though she never went to China. So it can be super rewarding, but it can also be difficult. It's just something that you have to try and navigate your way through and make sure that you remember that at the end of the day, what's the most important thing is family. So try and, keep when we're really passionate about something and we're trying to make everybody else understand the way we see things, just take a deep breath and try and not make it something that's going to make everybody fall apart, because at the end of the day, yeah, we're close. We're a close family. Yeah. So family first. But it can be frustrating.
Yeah. Do you set boundaries where like the work life can't go into a family dinner or this celebration or
My brother and I do. We definitely will go and celebrate different things. My dad has a harder time with not bringing business into family things, but I mean, he's 80, he's going to be 89 this year. So it's understandable that it's moments where we're all together. So he's like, okay, I'll take advantage of this moment. So we'll talk about this. But Daniel and I, since we work together all the time, do try and when we meet at somebody's birthday party, let's talk about other stuff.
No, I think that's good. I think that's good. Coming from the family business.
Yeah.
Also working with my brother and his wife, we'd set pretty nice boundaries or try to, and try not to bring it into
everything.
Full-on family dinners. That's the worst for us, because not everybody is actually hands-on involved in the business.
Right.
But everybody's got an opinion, and everybody wants to share their opinion, which sometimes great.
Yeah.
Other times.
Yeah, other times not so great. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I want to hear it. Yeah. No, it's a beautiful business. Obviously, you guys have done amazing things here, and you're on the forefront of coffee on so many different ways and different levels.
We do try to always bring out the best that we can in the coffee. We've got somebody new in the last 2 years in our processing, Zamorano, which is a university in Honduras graduate, who's helping us with the processes, and she's doing a great job, because that's the whole thing too. We had 400 different processes, or different offerings of Geisha this year. And that's a lot to keep track of, to keep inventory, to keep them organized. Right. And so, I think we're going to try and tone that down a little for next year, because I don't know that we need that many. But the thing is that we do one lot, and we'll do, cool fermentation or low temperature fermentation, ambient temperature fermentation, mechanical mucilage removal, natural anaerobic, natural climate control, and so on and so forth. And then we have the same coffee like 7 different ways.
One cut, you count 7 different items.
And maybe we don't need quite that many.
Yeah.
Now, I do have buyers, so it's super interesting that it's happened this year more than any other year, where they clearly want, or the FCs or something, the climate control room and the low temperature fermentation, or they want the WBs, which is an ambient temperature fermentation and a very traditional drying. So I've noticed that sort of things are dividing up a little bit into 2 different groups of buyers.
Interesting. Okay.
The traditional and the ones who like our new processing methods. So it's good to have both, but maybe we don't have to do every single one. Okay. By the way, the ones that we competed with in the Best of Panama were all climate control. The washed was low temperature fermentation and then climate control. And the Laurina was a pre-dried. So we pre-dried on a bed, and then it was an anaerobic climate control drying. And the natural was just climate control. I mean, it just went straight into the climate control room. Climate control room, we could control temperature, humidity level, and airflow. So it gives us a lot more control over the drying than it does outside on the beds, because outside on the beds, if the humidity level goes up, well, so does the humidity level in a bean, and it goes down, then it goes down again, and it's a lot less control. And then, of course, we have very traditional things like the guardiola drying, which is a mechanical rotating drum dryer. And that gives us a lot of control as well. But
you wouldn't put your top coffee.
I wouldn't put our top coffees into it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's for the category.
Yeah. Well, there's people that buy like the guardiola drying, but it's not. Sometimes it can come out quite nice, or it's like the mucilage removal that we did on that Lino 7B. Like sometimes it can be brilliantly floral if you do things like that, but sometimes it's not. And I think it's better to go with the ones we have found more luck, let's say, with the low temperature fermentation, with the climate control.
Right. Amazing. Well, I really admire what you're doing.
Thank you,
I
Cole.
think many people in the industry look up to Esmeralda as, the goat, I think is the way to say it.
Thank you.
How's
that?
And thank you for taking the time to just, have a conversation and share on By the Drip here.
You're welcome.
Where can people contact you should they want to follow up with this online? Is Instagram the best place to send them?
Instagram to just see what we're doing would be Hacienda Esmeralda is our handle. If they actually are interested in anything else, they could write to sales@haciendaesmeralda.com.
Okay.
If it's for a question about anything that they actually, because Instagram, I am not as I'll see it once in a while, and then I'll basically tell them write to us at sales@haciendaesmeralda.com.
Business inquiries, email for casual.
But you can check out our Instagram account. Yeah, it's Hacienda La Esmeralda.
And then the website is Hacienda Esmeralda.
Yes, it doesn't have la.
No,
in it.
blah.
Yeah, exactly.
I recommend going on there too. You can read about the different farms and different regions. There's lots of really great information on there.
Information on there. You can check out our auction website too, which is auction.haciendaesmeralda.com, and see about the floral experience coffees, and that should be up live at this too.
There you go. And this podcast should go live at the World of Coffee in Geneva.
Cool.
I think day 1 of Geneva, this will air.
Very nice. Well,
There you go.
we will be there.
Hopefully see you in Geneva.